I'm R.A. Schwartz, and welcome to the Winsidr show where it's all about the W. I've been waiting for this one. Ace Pedraza joins me to discuss one of the most fun to talk about teams over the history of the W, and definitely this upcoming season, the Phoenix Mercury. Welcome back to the show. Ace, so excited to have you back. It's been far too long.
Yeah.
We're going to have to institute some sort of, after X amount of days, you have to come back on the pod. Although after the next week, you might be sick of me. How you doing?
Good. I'm doing great. I'm excited to talk about this very funky Phoenix Mercury team.
Yeah, funky is a great way to put it, which is not a word I often think of when I think of Phoenix. Okay, so let's dive right in. Summarize, recap. Where are we with the Mercury? What happened last year?
Well, last year, I think it was sort of like a feel-out year for them. They luckily had back Brittany Griner, which was awesome. And they also still had Diana Taurasi at the wheel of things. They had some funky rotations going on with the team overall throughout the season due to a lot of injuries. And so they couldn't help that. And that is definitely what landed them towards the bottom of the standings. I believe they were last year. So, I don't think that they were intentionally trying to get that low. Like I said, injuries definitely played a huge part in that. The reason why I don't think they were trying to play that terribly is because they didn't necessarily have great draft positioning either. And so it wasn't like they were able to improve themselves in at least first round, being able to pick anybody in the first round of the draft, which was very deep. But they were able to pick up Charisma Osborne, which I think is a fantastic fit for them. I hope she is able to stick on that bench just to add some depth to them. But yeah, they had a lot of things to improve on. Just a really rocky year last season.
Well, they're one of those teams that, as long as you have your legend, on their way out, and having a legend who's still in their prime in Brittany Griner, I think you're going to put all your chips in. And that's a good thing and a bad thing, right? We've seen over the past few years, the Phoenix Mercury, exciting and fun to watch, because even if it's not going to be great basketball, there's going to be something reality TV show-esque going on in that locker room, whether that's Diana Taurasi, saying she wants to fight a coach or not a coach, a ref, whether it's the Mercury almost fighting their coach, the Mercury almost fighting each other, the Mercury, this team is just too good to not talk about. And yeah, look, when you put all your chips in, I'm not that big of a betting person, but you put all your chips in, sometimes you win big. Often, as the saying goes, the house always wins and you lose. And so, I like what they have continued to do over these past 5 years. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I don't like the individual offseason moves they made. I don't think it will work, but I understand what they're going for. So before we dive into what they got, who they lost, just want to remind everyone, make sure you check out our show notes for W merch, some of our sponsors and affiliate links. We just started working with an online sports betting books. So definitely check that out. If you have a gambling problem, please get help. Use the phone number in the show notes. And if you're buying WNBA merch from Fanatics, Breaking Tea, or Homage, please use our link. It's a kick. They get the same amount of money. We get a kickback. You're helping the WNBA ecosystem. Okay, so I always like to start off with who they lost. And then kind of before we even get into who they got, I'm going to ask you who they're going to miss the most, I guess, is the question that I'm, they lost Mo Jeff, Megan Gustafson, Shea Petty, Bree Turner, Skylar, and Michaela Onyenwere. I feel like Skylar's the easy answer.
I mean, that's the obvious one, right?
Right? She turns them from a three-headed monster to, just, again, Diana and BG.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, Skylar, first of all, not only leaving, but then going to a team that has now also quickly turned into a super team and into a three-headed monster themselves. And then on top of that, also being the first team they played in the preseason and ending in a very spicy end of game huddle where Skylar was overheard saying like F this other team that I was just playing for. It's tough if you're, a fan of the Mercury to see that, because, this is a team that, we'll get into the moves after this, but this is a team that obviously was making moves to try to improve upon last season going into this season. And imagine how much even better it would have been if they were also able to retain Skylar. The personalities, I guess, just did not obviously end up clicking between Skylar and, certain members of the Mercury. And so it just didn't seem like it was in the cards in the first place. I don't think she would have wanted to go back. But she's their biggest loss, especially in offense, and considering the fact that last season they were last in points per game out of anybody in the WNBA. And so her loss is felt, and I'm going to go with actually Shea Petty as the other player that I think is going to be a huge loss for them. I believe she just got waived, which please pick up Shea Petty. I don't know which teams.
Somebody's got to.
I don't know which teams are listening, but please pick her up. She was such an excellent pick up for them last season. She was probably one of the only Phoenix players that I feel like was consistently contributing somehow on the floor, on offense especially. Her loss is definitely going to be felt. And so those two, I think, are definitely two of the players that come to mind when I think of, man, like the Mercury are going to be good this year, but they would have been in another echelon had they been able to retain those two players.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you on that. First of all, I just want to throw this out there because I've been thinking this, and I struggle when I haven't spoken my thoughts to the void. But whoever is advising Shea Petty, I don't know why you signed that Connecticut contract. I could have told you weren't making the team just looking at the roster. There's and maybe it was an idea of go there being camps, so then you're already still around. People don't forget you. You're going to hop somewhere else. Maybe you do make the roster. Fine. I get where you're coming from. I just have to have thought that there's a better option out there. There's other teams that could really use her services. And like you said, she does all those things. She, like, if you need her off the bench, if you need her to start, she playoff P. Playoff P.
Yeah.
But the other player that I do want to talk about, because I think Mojeff is going to be replaced in certain ways, Megan and Bree Turner are two players that I don't think they're on that same level as Shea and Skylar. But I do think that those are going to be impactful aspects because in a moment, we're going to get and break down this roster a little bit. They're lacking that interior defense that Bree Turner had. Now, I understand. Look, everyone's going to be like, all right, you always say that the WNBA is a league. You can't be a specialist in just defense and get a roster spot. Totally agree. Bree Turner has been the exception to the rule for many, many years in this league. Excited to see what she does in Chicago. But so for me, having that 1-2 punch of BG and Bree Turner was always like, okay, I at least know that Taurasi is a turnstile, but we have that defensive flank that's going to hold us up. Now I worry about that because as we're going to get into this roster, it's basically like their only big is BG. And maybe I'm crazy. Right. Maybe I'm like misunderstanding something, mishiding somebody. I don't know. But all I'm saying is like, this is basically a roster of a ton of guards. I'm excited for it. This is a video game roster, but it's a bunch of guards in BG. So when I'm looking at Megan and Bree Turner, who like, even if they're not producing, as the greatest offensive elements, offensive threats, rebounders, whatever, they are adding to this team in intangibles, and that's what they're going to need. Now, as we talk about who they got, look, they got some talent, all right? They got two WNBA champions, Natasha Cloud and Kalia Copper. And they add a huge blow for Connecticut to lose this player, but a huge, huge gain for the Phoenix Mercury to get Rebecca Allen. Who do you think this is such... I almost like... you can't do start bench cut because like Becca Allen comes off the bench and then it's like you can't cut. Who I guess like in terms of the success of this team of those three, who do you think is going to be the most important? And this is taster's choice. Maybe you like lime ice cream, maybe you like chocolate, maybe you like strawberry. You know what I mean? Because like all three of these are going to give such impactful aspects to the team. So I'm curious for you.
I'm going to have to go with Natasha Cloud just because of the defense that she provides, especially in that backcourt. I'm assuming she's going to be seeing a lot of minutes with Sophie Cunningham, who's not exactly the world's greatest defender. Diana Taurasi, who you already said, also not very solid of a defender at this stage in her career. So she's going to bring that extra punch where, if for some reason this offense isn't able to piece something together, which doesn't seem very likely given these pickups. But if they're unable to get anything going, on any given game, or especially in the postseason where you kind of need to get stops in order to win a very close game, she's going to be that person that they go to try to get a stop. And she's reliable on defense. We saw that in last year's first round of the postseason. She pushed New York to their limits multiple times. And to the point where I think a lot of New York fans were like, hey, can we possibly, maybe just have her stay? That didn't end up working out, but she's going to be definitely that stopper for them. And on top of that, she's a great point guard. She's a great facilitator. She's going to elevate everyone else around her on the court as she did in Washington. And so I will say Natasha Cloud, although Kalia Copper is quite a pickup for them as well. I was shocked when I saw that they made a move for her.
That's like an unfair move almost, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I was completely shocked when I saw that that's where she was going. I had a feeling that Chicago was maybe going to see what they could do in order to get a couple of more draft picks this year or next. I was very surprised to see that was the team that she ended up landing with, especially given like the history there from the finals. But anyway,
I wonder, do you think she brought the door with her?
I hope.
That would be hilarious if she shows up the door. So here's my thing. I completely agree, because for me, Natasha Cloud, the failure in DC of recent has been that she wasn't surrounded by enough shooters. And there was this pressure on her, like, hey, you need to be a shooter, right? Like that, I'm a shooter, blah, blah, blah. She's not, in my opinion. She can shoot when needed. There's times where she's going to get hot. She is an offensive threat. Let's not get this twisted. She is a game manager and a facilitator. And she's at best when the example of her and Elena Deladon when she was hyping up Delhi for Delhi's MVP season, like that's the element you want Cloud in. And you look at who she's surrounded by: Becca Allen, Diana Taurasi, Copper, Cunningham. And I'm not even going to get into the bench yet, which we'll talk about. Shug Sutton's a shooter. This team is built of tons of shooters and a player who can facilitate and knows how to feed bigs. So that is the perfect, in my mind, perfect player to run this offense, especially because when I looked at Skylar in this role, Skylar is more of an offensive threat than Natasha Cloud. She can shoot, she can create her own, she can score more. So from my perspective, it was very much so the issues that there of that fit of Taurasi and Skylar was kind of, Taurasi wants to take a bulk of shots. And when you have a point guard who doesn't necessarily, like, there's only so many shots your team can take in a game, and you kind of have to divvy up the pizza pie to everybody properly. And if Natasha Cloud needs a smaller piece of pie, that leads more for their other players. And also, Natasha Cloud has great court vision. Her ability to drive, kick out, find the other players. There's so many shooters on this team. So I definitely like that. But for me, Kalia Copper is bringing something to this team that we have not seen in a while. I'm looking at this roster. There's not a lot of athleticism. When I see Ka on this roster, I'm thinking, like, first of all, get her an oxygen tank and a lot of water because she's going to be running a lot. Like, the fast breaks, the kickouts, the defense, like, all those plays, honestly, this is ridiculous, but her, like, staring down Sophie, those are the type of plays that I think of, right? Those energetic, high intensity. I remember talking to James Wade. I know he's kind of a pry in the WNBA space right now, but I remember talking to James Wade back in the day and talking about, like, Diamond DeShields and Ka running down the court. In a blink of an eye, they're on the other side of the court. They take 2 steps, they've gotten a rebound, and they're already putting a layup in on the other hoop. To have that athleticism and pair it with the shooting and size that they have with BG and with some of these other players, and then you add in Rebecca Allen's length, like, this roster is ridiculous. Now, it's very much a ledge. Once you get past 6, you're dropping off hardcore. What are they going to do to get BG extra rest minutes. What are they going to do? Taurasi's not going to be able to play a full season, right? So then you have only 5 players. And then you think, okay, we need to rest BG. Who are you bringing in? Is, Kiki going to make it? Is Natasha Mack? Like, there's all these players that, and then you start thinking about like other players that maybe they bring in. I want this episode to be timeless. So we're not going to talk about like, every single person who, because they've got a billion training camp contracts, but essentially just for our listeners, the way their roster is made, they're running with 11. They can only sign 5 more players because all 6 of their I'll say starting 6. All 6 of their starting 6 are guaranteed contracts. So they're not cutting that. They would lose out. And they're all good amounts of money, which means all the 5 other players need to be on vet, or not even on vet minimums, on rookie scales. So they can't even go and necessarily get a vet. And that's what the problem is. That's why you look at their roster and it's literally everybody. If you go to Her Hoop Stats, shout out to Her Hoop Stats, everyone is the same price tag, 64,154. That's literally the amount they're going to save. Like, I think it's $1,000 a person if they sign 5 players. So if my math is right, my math is horrible. No, but so like, this is a very interesting situation where they're very much stuck with these are your 6. And now, bring the rest together. So I'm curious, in your perspective, who would you like to see to make the team? And kind of like, I don't know, what are your thoughts on the drop off, the cliff at 7?
It's a very big drop off. And like you already said, like, I think the biggest drop off positionally that's going to be a problem is at center. Because after Brittany Griner, the only other centers that I see listed on their roster as of right now, unless they haven't updated their list, but all I see right now is Brittany Griner listed as a center. And excuse me if I butcher this player's last name, Bella Mirikate.
Bella M.
Bella M. So these are the only 2 centers that they have on the roster. That's a big problem. In addition to that, I think that they are putting a lot of eggs in the Shug Sutton and Charisma Osborne basket, which is to say, I think that they are anticipating that they will be able to be such good floor generals for this team while also providing that, like, I guess, bridge of an offense between giving the starters rest and then the starters being able to sub back in, that they'll be able to survive those minutes without a majority of the starters in. However, I do believe that there are going to be 1 or 2 starters that are going to be playing some pretty heavy minutes as a result of that drop off. Diana Taurasi is not going to be one of them, just because
shocker.
She's where she is in her career. So I highly doubt that she's going to be wanting to play those heavy minutes. I could definitely see Rebecca Allen ending up being somebody that they have on the floor a lot, just so that they could have a much more stretched out offense, and also just to have somebody on the floor who can, in the blink of an eye, pull up for a 3 and have a pretty good shot of making it, which I think is the role she had in Connecticut, especially last season. Just not necessarily bailout shots, but more so just she was an excellent 3rd option to have on the floor for that team. It's going to be very interesting how they dole out these minutes. I'm curious to see, just in addition to that drop off, how this team is just managed in general by Nate Tibbetts. This is going to be his first time.
Yeah, we didn't even. I'm not even gonna. We can touch on it brief. We don't even need to dive. That's a whole episode
we don't
in
have
its
to,
own.
get into that. But how is he going to be managing this? How is he going to deal with these minutes for the first time in his career as a head coach? It's gonna be very hard, and I just think that, like I said, there's gonna be a few starters that are gonna be getting pretty heavy minutes just to, sort of replace the need for depth. But that depth is gonna be very desperately needed, especially come the postseason. I'm assuming that this roster, the way it's constructed, is going to make it to the postseason, but I don't know how far they're gonna be able to get with this lack of depth compared to teams like Seattle, who have constructed themselves in a way where they retained a lot of key bench pieces and then drafted complementary pieces for that bench, in addition to having such a powerful starting lineup. So it's like they both took very different approaches. I don't mean to turn this into a Seattle Storm episode.
Side note, I just want to say that, like, I love in the WNBA, so many of the players, obviously we know players have beef, right? But so many of the players get along. So many players, you're like, first of all, you're just like, oh, if this great player joined this team and these two great players played together, they'd be amazing. Well, that's not true. We saw that with Skylar and Taurasi. But the thing that's more interesting and more fun to me is that a teammate scuffle or a teammate beef can now ignite an amazing, or reignite, I should say, sorry, WNBA historians, reignite an amazing rivalry that we've seen this in every pro sports, right? Like, rivalries draw attention, make games more exciting. And now you got two players who dislike each other, who are on teams that have historically disliked each other, who have historically played some great games. And it just builds to it. It's not just, New York and Vegas. It's not just now it's Seattle and Phoenix. It's not just, Connecticut and DC. So I'm excited because when you have all these different rivalries going around, it makes things much more fun. I completely agree. And honestly, looking at this roster, the thing that's kind of confusing and head-boggling is they have talent, just not in the big spots. Like, these are young players. Hollingshed, Amy Atwell, Morgan Birch, obviously, shout out to my redhead. Natasha Mack, big fan. Williams, big fan, also has, like, maybe that's a player also. But all of these players are not the need, right? Like, they have a little bit of depth in guard and wings. They have literally no depth. And it's honestly mind-boggling, head-scratching, just as we talk it out. It's like, okay, so Taurasi, like, realistically, let's say on a good season, she's at this age, she's starting 30 games out of 40. That's the other thing. These are 40-game seasons now. 30 games out of 40 she plays. That's 10 games that Becca Allen's starting. So that's additional minutes, right? That Taurasi's not even playing in. So that's additional minutes. Now you need someone else coming off the bench. And then the more I look at this, the more I see this as a house of cards that eventually is going to fall. And I agree with you. I think they're too talented. If everyone stays healthy on this roster, they're too talented not to make the playoffs. And I think better than some other teams that have a deeper roster. But how can they survive in a series? How are they going to survive when the playoffs get long? Yeah, I guess we kind of talked about hopes and expectations. We kind of touched it all. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. Any other thoughts on the Phoenix Mercury?
No, I mean, I think, like I said, like I don't think this is a bad team. It's not. I mean, when you look at the starting lineup again, this is one of the most talented starting lineups in the league going into this season. I think my questions just remain with A, the depth, and B, the age of this roster. Are they going to be able to stay together for an entire season and play together for a majority of the regular season, when taking into account Diana Taurasi is, like, on the edge of retirement at this point? I am curious to see who ends up being just like a diamond in the rough, I guess you could say, off this bench. And I'm also curious to see how they survive in the postseason, if they rest on their defensive capabilities as a way to get through a series or a couple of series, and just how far this offense can take them, or at least the starting lineup's offense can take them. But yeah, I could definitely see them.
Also, how are they going to match up with, like, a Dallas or a Connecticut?
Mm-hmm.
That's just going to be. Side note, you talking about how good their roster is, I'm sitting here now and I'm, like, thinking to myself, because honestly, I look at this roster and I view Taurasi as interchangeable with Becca Allen because of how many games she's going to start, how many minutes she's playing, all that jazz. And because honestly, if I'm being real, sorry, people, I'd rather have Becca Allen on my team right now than Diana Taurasi. Like, if I had a team and I had one roster spot, I'm taking Becca Allen. So even, like, swapping Taurasi for Becca Allen, I'm thinking about, like, New York, I'm thinking about Vegas, and even Seattle. And I'm like, who has the best, just starting five? If you take one player out, you can take your worst player out of your starting five and replace them from somebody on your roster. And I think it might be Phoenix.
Yeah.
Sorry, what are your expectations for this team?
No, I mean that that was basically it. Like
Okay.
I foresee them making the postseason, but I don't necessarily have them as contenders right now. They're not in that tier just because of the questions about their bench's ability to actually like keep them afloat while the starters get rest. And I don't know, not to say that this season for them should be more of like a feel out year than anything, but I think it is going to end up being that. And then moving on from this season and looking ahead to next year, who do you want to keep around? What moves can you make to improve upon it? Is this just a way to see, like, all right, let's see if these players and these personalities can fit together? And if they do, let's build around that. Who individually do we want to build around? So, yeah, I'm excited. And I think BG is going to have a really big year for them, especially as she always does. So,
Yeah, that's the other thing. Like, if BG plays like she can, yeah. And I should note that Ka, Cloud, and Allen all locked in for 2025 also, which is a huge addition because you can, like you were saying, plan accordingly moving forward. Also, Taurasi, Sophie, and Brittany Griner, who are all making a fair amount of money. Crazy that BG is making less money than literally all their other starters. But hey, power to her. But yeah, just like all those numbers come off the books, so they do get a lot more flexibility with if Taurasi wants to come back for another year, if Sophie does, if BG does, whatever it is, they have a lot more flexibility with what they're doing with those players. And I don't think Taurasi's getting a max on her next one. Well, I'm sad to say I feel like we've agreed on everything on this team. And typically I appreciate and really enjoy arguing with you because it's always fun and respectful and enjoyable. So sorry for listeners, didn't have much to argue about. But Ace, tell me, I love to end the episode every single time. Who is your GOAT?
All right. So I was thinking about this today and like, I'm always very transparent about this. Like I started watching the W like much later than a lot of folks have in the space. I would say a couple of years ago, like the Chicago run to the finals and their championship. So 2021. And so I figured it would be very fitting that my GOAT at this point would have to definitely be Candace Parker. And also because we share a name. And so I have to take pride in that as well. But yeah, I just thought it was hilarious. Yesterday I was watching the men's league and they were doing like a tribute to Candace Parker because she's often on there as the commentator. And it took them like pages of like accolades on the screen to get through everything that she's accomplished. And I'm like, I cannot think of any single player or any athlete that I've watched that has had literally like at least a minute or 2 minutes of accolades have to be listed on a screen in that way. She is my GOAT, absolutely. I think that she's going to do amazing things, even in retirement, for the league itself. I think she says she wants to be a team owner at some point. I think that's going to be awesome if she's able to do that soon. Fingers crossed, with expansion being supposedly
Looming.
a thing.
Supposedly, yeah.
That is looming. But yeah, no, I mean, Candace Parker's, it's funny because like she's the player that got me into the WNBA, but I think a lot later than she probably got other people into the WNBA. But yeah, I mean, just seeing her be able to bring a championship to Chicago that late in her career, it's just so amazing. And then looking back and seeing all the other things that she's accomplished as a person and as an athlete, like,
well, that's what I was going to say. Is like, it's just crazy how many hours she must have in a day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, she's accomplished so much and she's just retiring now. One of my coolest Candace Parker things that I have is, I don't know how I came across it. She used to play for like the Shanghai Dolphins in China during the offseason. And I have like a full, like legit kit from their team with Candace Parker. And I was like, there's no way this is real. Google Translate, ask some friends. It's legit. It's real. And that might be like the coolest thing. Candace Parker's amazing. Well, I appreciate you. Have a good one.